First of all, thank you to BSP for organizing this very timely event and for having us here. I think it's very important that we talk about hydrogen right now, not only because it's a method for decarbonization, as Katarzyna was saying before, but also because it is crucial and urgent now that we ease dependencies on fossil fuels and also on other energy imports. And we have seen some clear signals coming from the European Union. We have seen the hydrogen strategy, the hydrogen bank that we actually started to discuss last year in this very room, and it was just starting. So, and today we have more transparency, we have more data, we have more awareness of what it is and where is it going.
I think one of the key elements that we have in mind is that indeed, in order to get to our climate neutrality in 2050, we have to already start today. Investment decisions taking place these years will impact what our energy system will look like in 2050. So, of course, from my perspective, one of the key aspects that we need to do, and that we can't do by ourselves, but it's really kind of a call also to the member states in the European Parliament, is to get all of those legislative pieces of information, regulation finished by the end of the year. I think that's one of the key elements for us to deliver, because that will give us a full picture of where we're heading. And then secondly, of course, once you have that regulation in place, we all know that this is an emerging market. So the second question is, how can we use then public support, not only in terms of financing, but also in terms of coordination, in terms of information, in terms of bringing people together to really help and enable this market to emerge.
One of the things that is usually underlined as a big challenge is the infrastructure. And I would like to turn to Camilla here. And what is the role of the infrastructure and how can it be developed a little bit more to create this new market?
Well, thank you. I think this is a question that is sometimes sidelined because we focus mainly on the emergence of the market, looking at the supply and the demand, right? Where will be the demand in Europe? In which regions which sectors should we prioritize? Where should we redirect which type of hydrogen first? And then where do we get it from? Meaning, do we focus on internal EU production, whether we should be investing in imports, how to coordinate all of that? But I think we forget very often is that none of that will happen if we don't have infrastructure for that. And when we talk about infrastructure, it's quite a comprehensive, in the sector of hydrogen, is quite a comprehensive notion, because you have to think about pipelines, landline pipelines, you have to think about subsea line lines, you have to think about ports, you have to think about shipping, you have to think about equipment in ports that will enable us to convert important derivatives into hydrogen, but you also have to think about storage. So it's quite a impressive ensemble of things that needs to be there at some point, and preferably, as Ruud has said, for the market to emerge in a couple of years. We need to make those investments in these pieces of infrastructure today. Today we know that infrastructure will first emerge in hydrogen valleys and hydrogen clusters, where there is already demand and potential supply of hydrogen. But at some point we will have to link those centers where there is already functioning small hydrogen markets between them, and organized a sort of meshed networks in order to respond to challenges of this market, which is, for example, the fact that the supply of renewable hydrogen does not necessarily match the demand. The demand will be constant. The supply will be intermittent because of delegated act, we have to correlate the production temporarily, the production of renewable hydrogen with the production of intermittent electricity, renewable electricity.
I think that as a whole European Union, we should remember that we have 27 member states, and also, talking more, we have different regions, yeah? And frankly speaking, I think that the hydrogen sector is not independent sector. It's a sector that is highly influenced by the situation of the whole energy sector. We should take a perspective of different regions and not to put all of the countries in one basket, yeah? Because of the local characteristics, yes? We see, as Ms. Camila mentioned, that because of these factors, yes, because of the carbon intensity, because of the availability of renewables, because of the weather conditions, probably will have some challenges to meet the future demand for RFNBOs using only domestic supply, yeah? Maybe similar like Germany or Benelux countries, yeah?
I think what's really important, and also the regulatory framework that we're developing right now at the moment, is that we're really pushing for this cross-border collaboration within the EU. And I think even without this cross-border collaboration as a key element of a hydrogen market, and we've been in a lot of discussions about, like, you know, is EU competitive vis-a-vis what is happening in the rest of the world? But for me, that is one of the key elements that we can provide in the EU as a whole.
We agree that the hydrogen strategy and the framework that the EU is setting out is already really, it's setting a plan, it's setting a direction, and that's super important. But we do think that there are a couple elements where there could be more clarity, and those are around prioritization and planning. And so I guess, and maybe also to respond to one point that you made at the beginning, clarity also in the sense of the demand that we expect to have for hydrogen by 2030. And I'm sure many of you are familiar, there's various studies and estimates and different numbers from different groups on how much demand we'll actually need in 2030, and it probably won't be the 20 million tons in REPowerEU. And so I think it's important to also be clear about that and honest about that. And I mean, we have existing hydrogen demand that currently is mostly dirty. So starting with that and decarbonizing that, I think, is like a pretty clear starting point that maybe we haven't prioritized as much as we could have. So, I mean, we foresee, for instance, at the EU level, that EU has a really important role to play, particularly because the member state coordination, cross-border coordination is so important, as you said. So when we think about like now in the gas package, we strongly support an independent network operators for hydrogen body. But we could actually also consider going a step further, like this UK example, where there's an EU body independent of ENTSO-E, ENTSO-G, NOH, that can kind of inform and make decisions and to kind of think ahead across all of those different sources of those energy vectors, and kind of think towards the future energy system that we want, rather than starting from kind of the legacy system and what we're used to, and really make kind of innovative decisions and use this as an opportunity to find the opportunities out of this shift, like, for instance, more competitive industry through decarbonization.
I would say two subcategories of challenges for the regulation. The first one is implementing what is already decided. We had a couple of days with Mr. Kempener, because he came to our working group last week. I also followed his speech yesterday at Politico event yesterday, and I kind of feel we are a part of one family right now by today. So he mentioned a very important aspect is that we have now close to the majority of main files that are shaping the hydrogen policy in Europe today, and which are part of Fit for 55 package. I mean by this, for example, e-fuel aviation, e-fuel maritime. For first time in the history, we have specific targets for FRNBO, renewable fuels of non-biological origin. And the main piece of the puzzle, obviously, we have already a deal on renewable directive, the so-called RED III, for those familiar with the Brussels jargon. And here again, we have, for the first time, very specific targets for the industry and for transport. But what will be really interesting, we know already what's there. There are 2 points. First of all, we still have some points of uncertainty regarding some points of this legislation. I will just give an example. We know that the last legs of the negotiation on RED III was the conflict between France and the rest of Europe, basically, about exceptions for ammonia producing facilities. And so there's been a sort of agreement and then a statement from the Commission, but we still don't know exactly what would be in practice the consequences of this this exemption being implemented in member states in terms of achieving specific targets that by chance is the target in the industry sector. So that's the first piece of the puzzle. The second uncertainty is how member states, and this is something you referred yesterday to, is how member states will actually implement the targets in nationally. For example, in the industry sector, we know by 2030 we have to fulfill the target of 42% of FRNBO in the industry sector, right? Of all hydrogen consumed to be coming from FRNBOs. But how will member states come about it? Whether it will be quota, whether it will be subsidies, specific subsidies for achieving this target, we don't know yet. We are waiting for the framework to emerge. So even if the framework is there at the EU level, there are still question marks, and they are still the way it will be translated in member states might actually be very, very different. So it will complicate a little bit of tasks in order to have more legal certainty as of today. So that's the first point. The second point, we still have some files being open, right? That are part of the Fit for 55. The first one, gas package, gas and hydrogen package, a major big cookie to cook or to bake. My apologies, I am absolutely null in cooking. That's why I'm confusing these two. I should not come out like this, but it happened. But so the major piece of the puzzle, because the gas package will actually set up the exact setting in which we will be able to operate hydrogen and gas networks of the future. It defines rules such as unbundling, third-party access. I know that sounds like black magic to many of those who are not familiar, but these are extremely important rules in terms of how the legacy operators transmission gas operators, distribution gas operators, what will be allowed for them if they decide to invest in hydrogen tomorrow or even today.
When we talk about hydrogen market development, of course, financing is, I think, the most important part of the discussion. And we as Orlen or as a region highly appreciate the idea of the EU Hydrogen Bank, and that we have the decision about the first pilot auction. So the thumbs up and the great direction, but we have some points to come up to discussion and considerate, because also in connection what I has mentioned before, we see that Hydrogen Bank in current form maybe will support only some part of the regions that have better conditions, for example, weather conditions, or for example, the situation of the energy market for producing quite cheap hydrogen, RFNBO hydrogen, yeah?
We think that we need to have ensemble of solutions for decarbonization. We cannot just bet on one type of technology, on one type of vectors. This is not viable. We don't have, for example, electricity grid capacity to make sure that everything is electrified. We will need also in the mix, we will need green molecules. And there is a very, very interesting study that was published, but was commissioned by the European Commission in July. It was made by Artelis and Metis, and it was about decarbonization scenario in the industry sector. And they actually analyzed two scenarios: high electrification and high hydrogen share scenario. And what is interesting is that the share of hydrogen, even in the electrification scenario, is quite important. We are expecting around 20% of energy from all derivatives and hydrogen confounded to represent 20% in 2050. So it's not about making the entire economy hydrogen-based, but it's about to finding the way we can find synergies. And hence I will make the link with the storage, because storage is
Sorry, interrupt you 1 second, because these two scenarios are interesting, but they were like coexisting together, or they were like presented as two alternatives?
Two alternatives.
Okay.
Yeah. And still, even in high electrification one, hydrogen had a very important role. It's really fascinating to see this market to emerge. There's been a quite interesting article last week in Euractiv about sort of a hydrogen bubble about to explode by one journalist of Euractiv, saying that slowly everybody is realizing we are putting so much money into this sector and it's just not bringing anything. We will not reach the results, we will not reach the targets, it will not happen. I don't believe that. I think we are at the beginning of the road. I think we have all the instruments at our disposals. I think we have political will, and I think the challenge will be what will happen with the next commission and the next parliament, and what will be the direction, because we have this signpost there, but how are we going to go about in the couple of years? It will still really rely on the political will of those in power in Europe, and also on those in power in member states, because we cannot forget that this strategy will be implemented at member states level. And as Ruth said, it will be about, I'm still quoting Ruth, I don't know what's going on. It will still be about member states cooperating, linking, making links, making connections, learning from each other. So that will be very much important. But just wanted to share the enthusiasm to be part of the movement, because to me that's not so much the end of the bubble, but the bubbling itself happening.
Thank you, Mika.
Yeah, of course. So I think it's very hard to summarize in a few words, but I will try. So of course we are one family, one community, but we have some local characteristics. So we have the different regions, different member states, and I think the one point is that we should remember that one family, but not put all family to one basket. So as I mentioned before. Second point is clear rules in our home. So we are family, but we need a transparent regulatory framework that will give us a clear path for the final investment decision. Hopefully we are on the final stage of RED III, new gas package, crucial regulation. And third point is financing. So we need state aid support, different types of support, capex, opex, to fulfill regulatory targets, and at the same time maintain international competitiveness.